So, ladies and gentlemen, jog your memory. What was the greatest band, non-band in music history? Was it Lenny and the Squigtones, the Monkees, Spinal Tap? Oh, you're far off. It's the Rutles. Now, everybody knows or doesn't know that the Rutles were a plan by a bunch of British comedians and musicians to do an abject parody of the Beatles with a kind of a note for note and design by design, the history of history remake of the first pretty well decade of the Beatles. Now, the Rutles first came to major prominence mostly in North America with a mockumentary that bombed on the American TV as a substitute for an episode of Saturday Night Live. It's called All You Need Is Cash. This 78 television film that traces in mockumentary style the career of the fictitious English rock group called the Rutles. As TV Guide described it, the group's resemblance to the Beatles is purely and satirically intentional. From the early years at the Cavern and the Reeperbahn to their landing in America, playing for the Queen before that, a Hard Day's Night to hear it all, a Hard Day's Rut. The parodies that are presented by mostly Neil Innes and Eric Idle are so spot on, they should have been released as singles because a lot of people believe this was the foundation for the later anthology, which came out in the mid-90s, because you don't know where the Rutles All You Need Is Cash starts and anthology begins, like the documentary. Now, again, the film was co-produced by the production companies of Eric Idle of Monty Python fame and Lorne Michaels, and it was directed by Idle and Gary Weiss. It was first broadcast on the 22nd of March, 1978, earning the lowest ratings of any show on American primetime network television that week, though those who did watch it gave almost unanimously good reviews. To my knowledge, it wasn't shown in Canada first run, so I saw it on VHS. It did much better in ratings when it premiered in UK on BBC Two on the 27th of March, 1978. Now, All You Need Is Cash is a series of skits and gags that illustrate the fictional Rutles story, closing following the chronology of the Beatles' career. Now, Eric Idle plays numerous characters in here, including Dirk McQuickley, a parody of Paul McCartney, as the narrator, a parody of Alan Wicker, and a Stanley J. Cramerhead III Jr., occasional visiting professor of applied narcotics at the University of Please Yourself, California. Now, Neil Innes is spot on with his parody of John Lennon, one Ron Nasty. John Hazley plays Barry Wham, Barrington Womble, a parody of Ringo Starr, and Ricky Fattar as Stig O'Hara, a parody of George Harrison, who sings in the movie but doesn't speak. Parallels there. Michael Palin plays Eric Manchester, Ruttle Corp press agent and lawyer, a parody of Derek Taylor. George Harrison does a guest appearance as the interviewer. Bianca Jagger, Mick Jagger's then wife, plays Martina McQuickley, the wife of Paul McCartney. I don't know if it's Jane Asher or Linda Eastman. John Belushi plays Ron DeCline, the most feared promoter in the world, a parody of Alan Klein. Dan Aykroyd plays Brian Thigh, an ex-record producer who turned on the Rutles. Just as Decca had turned down the Beatles, as a parody of course, the man who turned down the Beatles, Dick Rowe. Gilda Radner plays Miss Emily Pools in a cameo. Bill Murray plays, of course, Bill Murray Decay, a parody of Murray Decay. Gwen Taylor plays Mrs. Irish Mountbatten Chastity, a parody of Yoko Ono. Ron Wood does a great guest appearance as the Hells Angels. Terrence Baylor plays Leggy Mountbatten, a parody of Brian Epstein, and I don't think he even speaks in the movie. Now, Henry Wolf plays Arthur Sultan, the Surrey Mystic, a parody of the Maharishi Mahesh Yogi. Jeanette Charles as the Queen of the United Kingdom in one of her early performances. And with interviews with Mick Jagger, Paul Simon, Roger McHugh, and Ollie Hassel as Leppo the Fifth Ruttle, a.k.a. a la Zeppo the Fourth Mark's brother, a parody of the so-called Fifth Beatles, Stuart Sutcliffe. Barry Cryer plays Dick Jaws, a partial parody of music publisher and singer Dick James. Frank Williams plays record producer Archie McCaw, a partial parody of George Martin. And Penelope Tree stars as Penelope Stig's wife, a partial parody of McCartney's ex-girlfriend, Jane Asher. So my basic theory, when people start first watching this mockumentary, the Beatles fans turned it off because really, if you're a pure Beatles fan in 1978, they were still thinking the Beatles were going to get back together in that famous $100 million offer. I think a lot of people got pissed off, but it has that Monty Python type of style. Now, the film was co-written by Idle and Neil Innes. The music and events of the Rutles paralleled that of the Beatles, parodying many of the later's career highlights. For example, the 1968 animated film Yellow Submarine became The Yellow Submarine Sandwich, and the song Get Back became Get Up and Go. Get Up and Go. Great. All the Rutles songs are tremendous here. Now, the Rutles, again, were played by Idle, Halsley, Fattar, and Neil Innes. The band originally appeared in a sketch on Idle's program, Rutland Week on Television in 1975. The film has many cameo appearances by both English and American comedians, including alumni Monty Python, Saturday Night Live, and Rutland Week on Television. Now, George Harrison's cameo role as a television journalist conducting an interview outside the headquarters of Ruttle Corps is a highlight, oblivious to the stream of people coming out of the building carrying items stolen from the office. Now, this is a reference to the Beatles' famously plundered Apple boutique and Apple headquarters, where even the ceiling lining was looted. The interview ends abruptly as the microphone is stolen out of his hand. Now, numerous, again, Saturday Night Live and Pythons make cameos. Now, Innes, a former member of the English musical comedy group the Bonzo Dog Band, who were associates of the Beatles, and he was also an associate of the Monty Python troupe, became acquainted with the Beatles when the Bonzo Dog Band made a cameo appearance in the film Magical Mystery Tour, in which they performed Dead Cab for Cutie. Paul McCartney had also produced the Bonzo's 1968 hit single, I'm the Urban Spaceman, composed and sung by Innes. Now, 14 of Innes' songs were released on a soundtrack album. The CD version added 6 songs omitted from the original vinyl album, named The Rutles. The album was both critically and commercially successful and was nominated for a Grammy Award for Best Comedy Recording of the Year. I think it was outside its category. It should have been nominated for Pop Single, Get Up and Go. Now, their orchestrations and arrangements for the Rutles recordings were made by film composer John Altman. John Halsley, Ricky Fattar, and Neil Innes performed their own respectable musical and vocal parts, but Eric Idle's vocals were sung slightly sped up by Ollie Halsell, who also played the lead guitar parts. Now, the show has been released on DVD, originally in a 66-minute version, incorporating cuts for syndication, later in a special edition, restored to the full length of 76 minutes, and with extras including a commentary by Idle. The full-length version replaces a spoofed newsreel voiceover by Idle with an American-sounding announcer. In 2013, the show was given a Blu-ray release in the form of a double pack with the Rutles 2, Can't Buy Me Lunch, once again including All You Need Is Cash in its original 76-minute version. The soundtrack was reissued on CD. It included additional tracks from the original TV sessions, released remixed in stereo by Neil Innes. Innes, Fattar, and Halsley returned in 1996 to record the Rutles Archaeology, but without the involvement of Eric Idle. Now, why this is very interesting with the whole concept, if you look at the Beatles' transition in music, the Rutles covered, so it's more a tribute. And the fact is that Paul McCartney, John Lennon, Ringo Starr, and George Harrison were so transparent in their personalities. 4 smart Brits could imitate them with no problem at all. But I think Eric Idle stands out as Paul McCartney because see the way Neil Innes was playing John Lennon, it wasn't as what they call negative as John Lennon will come across before he hooked up with Yoko. Now, again, production company was, of course, Lorne Michaels Broadway Video. Now, I don't know exactly because Eric Idle never appeared in what he called the anniversary or the archaeology version. If there ever be another parody. Now, I know for a fact that Mick Jagger got some flack over his criticism of the Rutles because people think he was criticizing the Beatles, and Paul Simon seemed to be not catching on. It was a mockumentary. But Bianca Jagger and Mick Jagger's performance and Ron Wood make the show for me because the Rolling Stones again and the Beatles were friends and competitors. But Mick Jagger basically said it was all about women. And I think that sums it up. That's why the Beatles broke up. It was all about women because the women that were dating didn't want to be part of something ever again. So, ladies and gentlemen, that's our story about the Rutles. If you like what we're doing, give us a like, comment, subscribe, or share.